how many numbers do you get from female fans? Is that motivation for future wrestlers out there?
You're trying to get me in trouble with my girl over here. That's what I see what you're doing, Carlos.
Conversation with the people who were with me in the World TV.
So I'm very excited to catch up with Veinom the Nuclear Warrior. Yep, that's his name, and we'll leave it at that. He's a luchador, or a professional wrestler. I saw him on television and later had the opportunity to interview him in San Diego, California, at the Montgomery Waller Community Parks and Recreation Center. Veinom, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Carlos. Long time no talk. It's a pleasure to always catch up with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you. A little background for the audience. So there I was sitting at my desk at the CW, Channel 6 in San Diego, getting ready to head into our morning meeting when I looked up at the TV monitors and I saw you were beating up a man on our set. So it was like the best thing I've ever seen. So like many of us, we ran downstairs just to watch. And like me, I grew up watching wrestling. And in Mexico, which is just a few minutes south of San Diego,
right,
lucha libre is very popular, especially among youth.
Yeah.
Why do you think people gravitate to this form of wrestling?
Oh, man. I mean, there's so many reasons. You can't just narrow it down to one reason. I mean, it's the culture behind it, you know. The Mexican culture, it dates back to our roots, back to Mexico, you know, the luchadors from the golden era. You know, you're talking about Santo, Blue Demon, Perraguayo, Sin Caras. List goes on and on and on and on. Different stories, different careers. It's almost like food, right? Like a traditional cultural dish. Can't just narrow it down to one. Okay? There's like so many flavors, so many tastes, so many varieties, and that's basically what lucha libre brings to the table. Not exactly food. It's more like drop kicks and chops and body slams and flips and all that wonderful stuff. But you get what I'm saying.
Sometimes those are the best.
So much more than meets the eye.
Yeah. So, okay, I've heard of El Santo, or in English, the Saint, who was an iconic Mexican luchador, and maybe one or two wrestlers in the ring with Hulk Hogan back in the day. But you were actually the first luchador that I ever met in person. What do you remember about the first time that you were first introduced to lucha libre?
Oh, man.
I think when we talked, you said that you were 8 years old, and I can't remember if it was your grandma or your parents that brought you.
No, it was my grandma, actually, yeah. My nuclear granny, may she rest in peace, great woman. It was her. Mm-hmm. Basically for as long as I could remember, I was watching it with her. You know, and I have different bonds with my brothers and my sisters and my parents as it is. But with my grandma, it was always that relationship of going over to her house, watching Lucha Libre tonight. That's our thing. Because nobody else in my family really liked it. Nobody understood it. You know what I mean? Yeah. She did. And, I just gravitated towards it. You know, she'd give me a little bit of money here and there, go buy me masks and all that stuff. I was a spoiled kid by her. But, man, I was blessed to have a grandma like her. Thank God she got me into wrestling and not into anything else.
Amen. Praise all the grandmas out there.
Yeah, nothing compares to it.
So what's it like when I talked to you, you were, with a whole bunch of kids. What's it like introducing Lucha Libre to a new generation?
Well, it's funny that you say that. You know, I was just thinking about that. You put yourself in the position they were at that age, looking at wrestling the way you saw it, growing up. The way I saw it, it was this otherworldly thing. You know, they had this arena full of people, screaming their heads off into what they were watching in that ring. Two wrestlers, two gladiators, just different styles, different looks colliding, and hold for hold and move for move. It's almost like a outer body experience, like something else, like watching a sport mixed with theatrics, and it's epic and it's awesome and it's playing out before your eyes. And when I first saw it, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a pretty chubby kid, man. I wasn't like morbidly obese, but I was a pretty fat kid, man. And I knew as soon as I saw it, man, that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to be no doctor. I didn't want to be no firefighter. None of that stuff. No, I wanted to be a wrestler. And I knew it wasn't athletic, but I knew I could do the best freaking job that I could to whip myself into shape and do what I had to do to get there. And, you know, a few years back at a pro wrestling school, I believe it was, I was training here in South Bay. We had a couple new students start, right? And it was an eye opener. It made me also feel old, but it was an eye opener, you know, because they came in, they were all excited, and you know, we would ask them, you know, what made you want to get into this? What made you want to become a professional wrestler? And they would all almost have the same answer. You know, it's all what I've always wanted to do since I was a little kid. I saw it when I was little. I fell in love with it. You know, and that's basically, you know, the majority of people that are in this business will tell you the same story, and it's almost like love at first sight. You know, so we relate with that bond right off the bat, and I see a little bit of myself in that. And it's not just me. I mean, I'm sure, speaking for a lot of trainers out there, they see that. When they see that similar hunger that reflects the hunger they had when they were that age at that point in time, it's something special because it makes you, you know, appreciate it even more, that you did something that you want to keep implementing, that it never dies, that it never goes away. Because wrestling, it's one of those things that's not going to go away anytime soon. It's not going to go away ever. It's here to stay. And as long as there's hungry young people wanting to learn it, the business is in a great place.
So for the many fans out there, prior to COVID, what was a day in the life of a lucha libre?
Oh, well,
like, what do you do when you're not in the ring?
I mean, every wrestler have a different story. You know what I mean? Everybody leads a different life. But back when everything was normal, I split up my days, my routine. See, a few years ago, 3 years ago, I suffered a big injury to my stomach, right? I wasn't doing things a smart way. Like I mentioned, I was a chubby kid growing up, and I had an idea of what I wanted to become, and I knew it was ridiculous. And because, you know, whipping myself into that kind of shape was ridiculous. Not the idea, but, you know, getting there the way I did it. And I paid for it too, because I wasn't smart with my training. You know, I didn't really take any rest days off or anything like that. So I had to tone down my training because so since I barely starting out, still small name, not a big name, you know, had to work a normal job on the side. Okay. So my day would pretty much start at about 3:50 in the morning. Get ready, take a shower, all that stuff. Head out the door by 4:30. Didn't have my own vehicle at the point in time, so I'd get on the public transportation, get to work at 6:15, 6:30. Go to the gym at my work until 7:30, where I go into, you know, work my 8-hour shift. Got out of that. As soon as I got out of work, I would go back to the gym for another hour, and then I would literally be asking around my job and just, you know, basically hitchhike my way up to training, which was at least another hour and a half away from where I was. I would end up coming back home where I was staying at the time at about, 12:30, 12:50 sometimes, 1 in the morning, past 1 a.m., and I wake up and do it all over again. This happened for at least a good 5 years.
That's dedication.
I was going 100 miles an hour, man, and I was in it. I was in it because as soon as I found the place to go train, I wanted it. I found it, and it was like nothing else mattered. I'm going to focus on this. What I should have prioritized was my means of transportation there, because it made it way harder on myself, you know, all that stuff. And it ate me up. It ate me up on the inside for a really, really long time. I'm not going to lie. I don't really talk about my personal business on social media and stuff like that. You know me, I reserve my stuff, and I only talk about the business because that's what I am, a professional wrestler. But it was a really, really hard time because I didn't prioritize. In other words, I should have quit that job and just thrown myself into training, and the rest, I should have just let the rest settle itself out. You know what I mean? Because I feel that I spent more time that I should have working that normal job, trying to make income on the side instead of putting forth my passion in the ring. And I'm aware, you know, people talk, you know, I got my peers and all that. And, you know, you hear good stuff, you hear bad stuff, you hear all kinds of things. Okay. And that's just human nature. People are always going to talk, and everybody's their own biggest critic. And I'm a perfectionist. Okay. I'll admit my work isn't the flashiest. It isn't the nicest looking. I'm not an acrobat. I'm not a gymnast. I'm a professional wrestler, an old school one, and that's always been the idea. That's always been the goal, right? And training the way I was training wasn't smart. It ended up catching up with me, so I ended up toning it down big time. Ended up getting hurt. I tore my abs, got an ulcer and a hernia.
Wow!
All at the same time.
Oh my gosh!
So,
well, you made it through, right?
Got to. Ain't got no other choice but forward. As long as your heart's still beating, you best believe I'm gonna keep kicking forward. And well, like I mentioned, I was out of shape, when I was younger. And one of the things that, and this is no knock on anybody, but one of the things that I always wanted to prioritize was, I want to be one of those wrestlers that looks the part. I am the nuclear warrior. I am gonna look like a nuclear warrior. Whatever a nuclear warrior looks like, that's what the look is gonna be based on, right? So in my head, I'm like, well, I probably should have done powerlifting in high school. I didn't do it, but I jumped into the weight, so it's not a bad start. I went all out and I made sure I got, my whole abs going on, so I could look decent in the tights. I wanted to look like an action figure, right? I did not do it smartly, man, because on top of that, I was working at nights every single night before my shift, and I would get a big cup, those cups, those regular size big ones that they serve like at restaurants. They had one at my old cafeteria at the work. I used to fill it up with ice, right? And then fill up the cup almost to the top, nothing but espresso. And I used to down it every single night.
Wow.
And I was in a bad place, man. Stressing that. I wasn't getting booked because I wasn't making as many, trainings as I should have, as I could have. But I never stopped, and that's the thing. I never stopped keeping myself in shape. I went to training as much as I could, but yeah, man, I always prioritized keeping myself in shape. Like that was number one. And a couple of years ago, I was at a show, and one of my peers, I forgot who it was, a buddy of mine, just made a comment. He looked at me, he's like, "Wow, it's finally happened, man. You've let yourself go." And
did you kick his butt?
Woo, man, let me tell you that right there. Oh,
right.
I mean, we're backstage. I mean, I kind of gave him the death glare, and he was like, "Oh no," he was trying to explain himself, and I didn't take it too much to heart, but it made me really think about it. I'm like, this injury really did me in. It wasn't that I let myself go. It was just I tore my abs and got all the other two happened at the same time, and it was just I didn't really look or feel like myself at that point, But I kept grinding.
A lot of people don't realize what other people are going through behind the scenes.
Definitely.
And I felt that was like an example right there. How often do you work out now to stay in good physical shape?
Now I'm doing 3 days training where I can in a ring, and 3 days in the gym, the weights. And then the other, whatever day is left over, I'll just rest it. Or vice versa, I'll go train 3 days, and if my body's not up to the gym, I'll take a day off, or I'll alternate. I'll do something else. Because I mean, before, when I was 100%, and this was back 3 years ago, I was really, really, really unwise with my training, and I can't stress that enough, man. The most time I ever spent at the gym in one sitting was about 6.5 hours.
Wow.
6.5
That's
hours.
Crazy. Wow.
And it wasn't this is a new gym I'm going to right now, but the gym I used to go to was a small little weight room in a rec center, right? And they would check everybody coming in. It got to the point where they wouldn't even check me. They just saw me and just say good morning to me, because I already knew oh, this guy is here to stay. You know what I mean? So I'd go in, and I couldn't just do one body part or two body parts. I was full on Rocky mode. I wanted to do that. I had to do my abs every single day.
So during this podcast, you can ask questions that you wouldn't ask on TV. So here we go. Ready? How many numbers do you get from female fans? Is that motivation for future wrestlers out there?
You're trying to get me in trouble with my girl over here. That's what I see what you're doing, Carlos. No numbers. No numbers. So the thing with me, right? It's common among wrestlers, you go out to bars after the shows, and when you're single, that's the life, right? When I got into this, I've always felt like I got into wrestling a little bit late, and I know there's been success stories in this business of wrestlers that have gotten into the business later on and became huge. Like look at Diamond Dallas Page, he got into it, after he was like 30, right? But I feel like I should have gotten into it as soon as I left high school, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, being a perfectionist and all that stuff, like I really, really, really wanted to just focus on this, and that part of it was, being in character all the time. I'm sure I annoyed a lot of my peers backstage and some promoters. I know I have, because they would see me. I would be one of the first ones to show up at sometimes, and I'd already be in my gear, before the show. And I heard it a couple of times, Mark with a mask, or they'd be like, oh, that's something like a Mark would do, or oh my God, don't be a Mark, or you know what, it's not uncommon. There's been names in this business that have done it. Mick Foley, Mankind, he got when he got his mask for his gimmick, he couldn't stand wearing it at first, but then eventually it got to the point where he'd be wearing it a few hours before a show, and it's what you do. It's what you're there for. You know what I mean? It's as soon as you enter the building and you're there, it's on. The green light is on. You are who you're portraying. I am the Nuclear Warrior. Okay? Anything on the outside, as soon as I walk into that venue, that's all that matters. I am that. And the reason you've seen over the years me getting tagged in posts, taking pictures with the kids, that's always been like a big thing for me. Right? Like the kids are always watching, and I'm not gonna say I'm like awesome. A PG-13 freaking superhero over here that freaking take your vitamins and eat your cereal or whatever. Not no. No. But putting myself in their position, you watch wrestling, you see this performance going on in the ring, and you see the Nuclear Warrior in the ring, and you see the Nuclear Warrior be the Nuclear Warrior. How would it look if they look over and I'm like ignoring them because I'm trying to get a girl's number and stuff like that? So I always prioritize, man. Like I always try to prioritize, on social media like Facebook, Instagram. You get friend requests. That's not uncommon. But to answer your question, no. As far as like going out of my way to get it, no.
Historias de un reportero. Carlos tonight. Dale que viene lo bueno.
So let's talk about the name, Nuclear Warrior. What was the process like coming up with that particular name and your whole like personality and your character?
Oh, man. Well, I was 8 years old, and 7 or 8 years old, man, and it was after I saw my first big wrestling event, and it was like in person. I went to Tijuana. I remember it was Canal 12, and some of the raza, shout out to the raza who recognize, don't know what Canal 12 is. Canal 12, back in the day, growing up, Sundays and Saturdays, it would show lucha libre back to back. So it'd be, I believe, Triple A, lucha libre Triple A would come on first. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be like 2 hours long. And then that would end. As soon as that would end, for another hour and a half, or another 2 hours, CMLL would come on the air. So it'd be like, oh, okay, you had your like sports entertainment-based extreme style Mexican wrestling first. And now with CMLL, after that's over, you got your traditional, clean, mano a mano, freaking tag team, lucha libre, the traditional kind, right? So after, in between commercials, they would sometimes show whenever they would be coming to Tijuana, and they'd have, this was back in the 90s, late 90s, right? So things were a lot more edgier, and people just crossed the line more. You know what I'm talking about, man. Like, it was it was a cooler time. I'm not going to lie. It was a cooler time. So they had like this sick ass like announcement with the Exorcist music in the background, because I believe it was close to Halloween or a December show. I just remember it was towards the end of the year. They had the Exorcist theme song, and they were, showing all like these clips of these wrestlers. And I think the announcement went something like, "Oh, Promociones Baja California presenta, 100% Tijuanense presenta," and like they would just go through the announcement like, "El Santo, el Hijo del Paraguayo, contra la Parca y Super Parca," like stuff like that, right? And one of the main events
You're good at that.
it was like one of the announcers. I don't know who, but he has a very distinct voice. And one of the main events was Damien 666, Halloween, and the original Psychosis, Nicho. And they were going to go up against somebody. I forgot who. But I begged my mom. I begged her to take me and my brother, right? My older brother didn't like it, but I wanted to make it a family event, so I didn't come off as being selfish or whatever. But she ended up taking us. And wow. I mean, to think about it right now, being like that young, going into that arena. It was the auditorium in Tijuana, full of people cheering their heads off. I mean, you're just screaming. You saw these old ladies, they looked senile, and they'd be cursing, like cussing and flipping the bird and getting all riled up. And like at one point, a dude that was sitting a couple rows below me was flipping off one of the wrestlers, and the wrestler was threatening to jump the ring, get over the barricade, and go over there, teach him a lesson, right? He ends up jumping the rail, going over there, and getting in the guy's face. The guy, like, ran off. I'll never forget. I thought he was going to, like, clock him or something. But it ended up scaring my mom, long story short.
Yeah.
She's not.
She's like, we're never
she never really got into it. She's a very sweet lady. My mom just scared her, especially when she saw that Damien 666 character. She was going to like church at the time a lot, so when that happened, she must have thought like, "Oh my God, what is my son watching? Like I gotta take him to church."
Dios mío.
Something. So it was right there after we want to go see that show. I was in school, and man, I could not stop drawing wrestlers masks, different ideas, designs in my textbooks. One thing I'll admit, man, I got shitty grades in school. Horrible student, awful student, right?
Right.
I wasn't like a troublemaker, but I just didn't pay attention on purpose, man. I was just drawing ideas on the textbooks, and to this day, I still have my box, and it's full of little notepads, and I could show you little drawings that I made, just rough drafts of what would eventually become, the Nuclear Warrior. And one time, I think we were backyard wrestling with my friends. We used to do that a lot. In the apartment complex I used to live at, and we used to go walking around the complex, and we used to go looking in the dumpsters for the old the old mattresses people would throw away.
Yeah.
Right. And if we could just get one, that would be our ring. That's our ring, right? That we could do whatever we want on it. Thinking back now, it was really unsanitary and kind of gross, because sometimes there was like stains on the you know what I mean. So being kids, we didn't think about it. We didn't think about that stuff. For us, it was like, hell yeah, a ring. Let's get the other kids, because this thing's too big to carry all the way to the other side of the apartment complex. So we used to go there, and one of my friends, who's actually a wrestler now, I think you'll mind mentioning his name. His name is Motros Jungle. We've known each other since elementary school, and we used to actually backyard wrestle each other too. And I'll never forget, he used to play theme songs from his room on his computer, and we used to come out theme songs. And I didn't have my character yet, but I also, aside from watching lucha libre, I love wrestling as a whole. Always have. My favorite wrestlers here from America, two best: Sting, The Undertaker.
Nice.
Okay. And I'd get on my friend's bike, right, and pretend it was like a motorcycle.
Nice.
Just like The Undertaker, right? Come into the mattress, and I needed to come up with a name, right? I didn't have a name. Mm-hmm. And I think one time I was just like, I wanted to come up with something different like something badass and different, but something that had never been, you know, mentioned or thought about before. And God, I got stuck on the letter V because I went through the whole alphabet. I couldn't think of anything. I'm like, uh, Venom. No, that's already taken. Freaking the symbiote, freaking villain from Spider-Man. I said, no, I can't do that. Damn. And then I started thinking like poison. No, I can't do that either. It sounds too generic. So I remember, I don't know how it happened. I was looking down, and I just thought, vein, like my veins, like the veins you have. I'm like, veins. I like that. Kind of like Bane from Batman, but vein.
Yeah.
That's too. That's too good. That's too simple. I gotta add something else to it, like Veinom. I started calling myself Veinom. That was my wrestling name, Veinom.
Veinom.
Right? Yeah. The nuclear warrior idea that happened later on. I couldn't think of a gimmick for Veinom, right? And one of my favorite inspirations, one of my main favorite luchadors from Mexico, was this wrestler called Abismo Negro. He passed away about 11 years ago now, and he was great, man. He was great. He had the similar look that I was trying to go for with the spike and the masks. Mine are more spiky, right? But his were more set. It was more lines and just it looked really sick. He looked like a comic book hero come to life, and he was always really energetic, and he would also paint his mouth. You couldn't see his eyes, right? And he used to come into the ring, and he was like a bad guy at first, and he had this aerosol spray can and a lighter. So during his entrance, the lights would turn off, whatever, he'd come out, and he'd turn on the lighter and spray the aerosol, so he'd create like this big pyro flame blast during his entrance, and it was like the sickest thing I ever saw, right? Just a kid. But when he passed away, I was about like 18, 19, and I was trying to come up with like a for sure, like something that I could get made, right? I knew for sure later on I wanted, the whole tights, the boots, that, but the idea, the gimmick, the nuclear warrior, I wanted something that was like almost like a tribute, but mine at the same time.
Nice.
And after drawing and drawing and drawing, I came up with this idea that on paper looked like something I could not get made because it looked too over the top. Until I want to go get it made, and then they made it for me, right?
Nice.
But yeah, that's how it pretty much started, man. I got the name when I was a kid, and the Nuclear Warrior, that just ended up coming as I got older, and just ideas flourished. And
now you talked about this earlier, but how? So Veinom is on 24/7. It seems like. How do you manage to stay in character, or is it something that it's easily turned on and off?
Oh man, I don't even know anymore.
You're like, who am I today?
No, well, they say a lot of people in the business will say that your character in the ring, your presence, your persona, is an extension of you as a person, and that couldn't be any truer. Obviously, I'm not a nuclear warrior. I am not nuclear as a person. You know what I mean? Like, if I were to be exposed to nuclear reaction, I'd be fucked. I'd be like anybody else. I'd be dead. Right? It's over. So, but no, how he is, his persona. You know what I mean? And how I am in the ring, that rage, how I talk, how I move when I talk, how I express myself with my hands, with my gestures, with my body. And you've seen me in person.
Yeah.
You can't see my face. You can't see my eyes. You could only see my mouth. Okay? And off the bat, I knew that was going to be a challenge, but I knew if I stuck with it and I just kept at it, I was really, really going to be good at expressing myself without showing my face. And I've been able to do that. Here in the States, there's an old saying that you make your money with your face. It's all about facials. And it's true. It's really true. The thing is, the difference is when you're a masked wrestler here in the States, people are expecting you to, for the most part, do like flashy stuff, flips, impossible looking things, like you know what I mean, spectacular displays of like athleticism, like gymnastics and stuff like that. For example, like Rey Mysterio, all the luchadors, you know, coming from Mexico over here to showcase what they got. Pretty much a lot of the talent, the majority nowadays, it's what they do. And I'm not gonna lie to you, man. When I was little growing up, I thought I was gonna be over 6 feet, but that didn't happen. The Nuclear Warrior is supposed to be tall. Right? I mean, I'm tall for like, you know, I'm Mexican, so like I'm
like not in our community.
Like, yeah, I'm like a shade under 6 feet, so I'm not like really short. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My style in the ring, I've always wanted to be more of the old school, like, you know what I mean? Like the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s style. That's the style that I fell in love with, man. Like the storytelling in the ring, the character, getting into the character, like what they want to see in a wrestler. You know what I mean? Because aside from being that, I'm a fan first. And that's all of us. We're all fans first, whether you like it or not. So we got into it, you know? And so being on both sides of the spectrum like that, I could appreciate both people's opinions. You know, I go online or all over here, some fans talk about it, how, you know, it's nothing but super kicks and flips nowadays. And, you know, wrestling isn't as cool, right? Or isn't as exciting as it used to be because of the characters of back then. And there's not that many, you know, invested characters nowadays that, you know, people that draw their attention like the wrestlers from back then were. And honestly, that's how it is, you know, with most fans, they think that way. And I'm not one of those, because I think for the most part in wrestling, you have to have variety. You know, having variety, it's like the flavor of life. It's like you have to have it, right, to keep things fresh. You know what I mean? If you have all the same talent that does all the same things, all the same, it's not that exciting. But if you have, say, for instance, a high flyer, you know, somebody really athletic going one-on-one with like a really badass character, it makes for like a compelling match, you know, compelling storytelling. And that's what I bring to the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because off the bat, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the character that does like power moves. I wanted to, you know, I believe in what I do, and therefore the people that enjoy what I do believe in what I display. Because you have to believe in it, man. If you don't believe in it, it translates to the ring. The fans could tell, and they're not dumb. You know, they can tell when you don't believe what you're doing, and you got to. That's like number one. Although I fell in love with lucha libre first, the culture and everything about it, I love it, love it to death. The American style is what you're able to display more storytelling in. Yeah. If I can explain myself, like, you're more free to draw the fans in with what you're trying to convey inside the ring. And yeah, I learned it, and I like to incorporate both aspects. So in most of the matches that you'll see from me, it's not the same thing. You know, I'll throw in like, you know, some leg scissors here, leg scissors there, a couple of planchas or some dives. Yeah. And it's back to storytelling. So little hints.
What do you say to the fans who sit there and watch you, and they may be thinking, who's the guy behind the mask? Does he go to school? Was he a dad? Does he work?
The guy behind the mask. I don't know, man. Visiting that side, I don't know. It's not.
So obviously your family and your friends are all proud of you, right?
I like to believe so. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe. I know my nephew. He's been to some of the shows. He loves it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think he was aware that I was one of the wrestlers until my brother pointed it out to him.
Oh no!
But Yeah, my family's been to some of my shows, actually. I think it was my mom and my aunt, my tia. They showed up once to a show. And I swear, she left, man. She couldn't take it. No, and it was because of me.
Oh yeah.
It was 'cause
So
of
what have you
me,
been
man.
doing? What have you been doing throughout COVID? And do you have any upcoming shows like early next year or something?
No, actually, no, not at the moment. That's a lot of wrestlers, not just myself. This is a lot of people, especially my brothers in Mexico, luchadores from over there. They, for the most part, majority of them, this is their work. This is what
Yeah.
they do, you know. And there were a lot. The rules over there were different, strict but different here in the States. Like it was not allowed for a while. Right now, I
Okay.
think some of the big promotions are doing web shows. The shows that I did work were for Fist Combat. Had these drive-in shows a couple months ago, and I was, you know, booked on some of them, and it was like a drive-in show.
Yeah.
So it was like a drive-in theater. You show up in your car, you pay your money, you watch, the wrestling. Since there's no shows going on right now, I've been focusing a lot on myself physically. Trying because trying sounds so cliche. It's like you either do it or you don't. I've been going at it harder again. I'm doing it smarter than I was, but the training, the gym work, almost unfair this COVID thing happened. For so many people, it's really unfair because this hit us all. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
totally. I want everything to be back to normal.
yeah, for myself, speaking for myself and for many others, man, I just want to wrestle. That's what it's about. We don't feel alive when we're not in the ring. Luckily, I got in tune. My girl, love her to death. She's a personal trainer, and she she helped me out a lot, man. And I started eating more and just training smartly. Not spending longer periods of time inside the gym. That's not necessary. You don't got to do that, especially for what I want to do. I want to come back the best version of myself, and that's the goal with every wrestler. We want to be the best version of ourselves, be it the most athletic, the most, the best you can for yourself, like overall, in-ring presence, in-ring work, conditioning-wise, whatever. You just want to be the best you can.
And that leads me to my last question: is do you have any advice for young wrestlers out there who want to pursue in what you're doing?
If this is something you want to do, you got to make sure that you're 100% willing to give it 100%. Because if you're not, it's going to get all it can, right? Like you're not going to be happy doing it. You have to give it your all, okay? You have to, even if you're going and you get older, you lose sometimes. Most people, what happens, they lose their focus, they lose their edge. Sometimes they lose that motivation. They lose what happened to cause that fire, that burning fire, and they lose the ignition to that. Don't lose that. Think back to what you were thinking when you first decided this is what you wanted to do. Think about, be it if you were a kid, think about that freaking kid. You want to let that kid down, or you want to make that kid proud? You're going to have a family in the future, maybe. You're going to leave behind a legacy. You're going to leave behind something. And this isn't for everybody, Heard, I think it was Triple H mention it years ago, like on Tough Enough or something. Like, if you're in it for the girls, for the women, you're in the wrong profession, man. If you're in it for that rock star lifestyle, man, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You gotta believe it. Gotta believe it, man. Whatever you want to portray in the ring, believe it. Become that. Get involved in it. Because like I said earlier, it's an extension of who you are as a person. If you can't figure out right now that, just think about it. Like, who are you? How are you? What fuels your fire? What drives you? What do you want to see in the ring as a fan from you? And go for it, man. Go for it. No regrets.
No regrets. Good interview. All right, Veinom the Nuclear Warrior. Always great catching up with you, my friend. Stay safe and God bless you.
You too, man. You soon, Carlos.
And And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Check me out at Carlos Tonight on Twitter and Instagram, and Carlos Tonight Podcast on Facebook for more on the show and upcoming guests. My theme was created and performed by Skin Gales. The show was produced by yours truly, Carlos Correa. Carlos Tonight is available every other Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.